All right, welcome to Equal Time Soccer. I'm Matt Pravratsky, alongside the big time national teamer, Maddie Dahlien. Maddie, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I mean, let's just get this out of the way. Why should we mess around? You were just named recently to the U.S. U20 national team that's going to head down to the Dominican Republic and tackle the CONCACAF Championship, which, of course, if folks follow national team stuff, then would qualify for the team for the World Cup. No big deal, just a World Cup, super low key. Tell us what it feels like to officially make this team.
Obviously, I'm super excited. I'm super grateful, and honestly, just can't wait to get down there and get some games. Obviously, UNC season is coming up, so I'm just thankful to be getting like minutes and actual good games in, and I'm just really excited to get down there and play with like a bunch of new players from colleges. I think we all like know of each other, but it'll be fun to finally get on the field and play with each other.
There's nothing I love more than you being so low key as characterizing playing for the youth national team as getting some minutes to play your college season. That's like the most, yeah, I'm just, I'm getting out, I'm getting some game time, just trying to just suiting up for the national team.
Yeah.
Super low key.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we started chatting before we recorded, and I had to stop myself because I just have to nerd out about this. You were part of a sort of a double camp that took place a few weeks back, where they use sort of a double pool. So for the U20s, everyone up to a certain date can have a maximum age to be part of this team. But then they also did sort of a double group below it where 18s and 19s were also part of this group. And that's where you're in. You were one of the youngest players in this double camp. And I sort of jokingly said, I don't usually see the national team be this explicit, where they almost literally said, this is the big camp. Half of them will make it, half of them won't. Have fun. Talk about what that experience was like in particular, because I have to imagine it's sort of more specific pressure than I think the national team has already added pressure. But then this one really was, if you show well, you can make like it was more transactional than I think it's normally set up to be. Talk about just what that experience was like in that double camp.
Yeah, well, obviously the double camp was an added layer, and then obviously it was my first camp.
Right.
Oh, that was another added layer. So I think it was definitely nerve-wracking going in. But I think UNC did an amazing job of preparing me, and my coaches did a great job at talking me through it. And I honestly think the U.S. soccer system typically doesn't have a double camp like this close to the CONCACAF roster.
Right.
So honestly, I just wanted to go in and do my best and kind of show them what I can do. And obviously, I had a bunch of teammates in the camps that made me feel comfortable.
Right.
And honestly, I just wanted to give it my best shot. It was definitely overwhelming. And we scrimmaged the U20 team in camp. That was definitely also stressful because it was basically putting the age groups against each other.
Right.
But obviously, I love those environments. I love playing under pressure. So honestly, I feel like it kind of benefited me.
Yeah.
It'd be a higher stake because I knew I had to perform.
Well, in that, the scrimmage environment is so funny because I keep casually saying double camp as if it was just the camp was twice as big as usual. Yeah. But that structure of literally being the two teams is sort of interesting too. Did that mean that you were training separately and would just scrimmage, or were you all training together? What was the setup?
Yeah, so we were a totally separate camp, and we had a totally separate coaching staff.
Okay.
So the U19 camp I was in started, I believe, 3 to 4 days before the U20 camp. And then the days that we overlapped, we scrimmaged. So the U19s had a little bit of camp under our belts, and the U20s were just getting there. And obviously being an older age group, they were definitely the better team. So we got pretty pummeled in the scrimmage, but it was honestly just a great experience in general. But
I really love that it was set up as separate camps. I think obviously if you have a huge roster, in college, if UNC carried 35 players, you're going to have certain rotation during scrimmages anyway. But I
Yeah.
actually think the separate camp thing is sort of fun. Maybe I only like it as like a fan. Maybe it's not actually what a coach would like. I like the idea that there's sort of the kids are coming from across the lake and the other camp is coming over to our camp. Like
Yeah.
that, it seems like a 90s like summer camp movie to me.
Yeah. And honestly, it was definitely great from a perspective of I honestly don't think I would have gotten called in if there was a U19 camp because
Right.
I think the U20s was full of a lot of girls who had been called in before. And so honestly,
Right.
like a lot of me and the girls, it was our first camp, and a lot of breakout seasons from a bunch of freshmen. So I'm pretty grateful that they had another camp because it just gives like even more like opportunities to get in front of these coaches. And
Right.
so I think honestly, I think they will continue doing it this way because it just gives them a bigger pool to pull from.
I mean, I have to think too, one of the things I'm constantly so curious about is how a coach or even someone like me who, yes, I maybe watch a decent amount of games, but I don't watch a lot of club and I don't watch a lot of high school. So when players come to college and I'm covering a freshman, like let's pretend I covered UNC as much as I cover like the Gophers or whatever. Even when a freshman arrives, there's no way for me to know sort of which players are naturally built to deal with pressure the way you say you are, which is high pressure can actually help because maybe then you focus, or maybe when there's high stakes, there's a high bar to reach for, whatever. But for them, like for the Federation, having you in that camp, having twice as many means then they also have twice as many to see. Their hit rate doesn't have to be as high. They only have to they only have to bat 500 instead of batting like 800, because then they just naturally see like, okay, well, her game didn't crumble. If anything, it actually raised itself versus a player like me. Like I played low level, low talent soccer my whole life. And you put someone like me in a high pressure environment and I'm just like, so I'm playing tight, I'm playing scared, so scared. And so it's almost like if twice as many of you are there, it just gives them actually a higher margin of error. Like, hey, we brought in this kid from UNC. Turns out she's like stone cold ice in her veins, like she's ready to rip. Well, and so you being there and you sort of, I'm guessing even before this, you sort of knew yourself enough to know I handle pressure well. Were you then someone that, girls you chatted with, other teammates, then did you try to be like a little bit of a helping hand for anyone who seemed to be a little more wide-eyed, like a little more freaked out?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like I was pretty nervous myself. I was kind of just trying to focus on myself. But I actually had like a great group of girls at camp. I made a bunch of friends, and like I said, like a lot of the girls just from playing each other and hearing about each other across the conferences. So it's honestly just great to actually meet them. And yeah.
And so in particular, I think you're the type of player as an attacker where maybe people would think it's like her job is to score goals. Like maybe people would really reduce your role down to like get the ball, shoot, score, like give people assists, whatever. But I think, once you get to the level you're at, playing high D1, playing high level club before that, even frankly, like the type of team like Edina you played for in high school, and especially the youth national team, I think there's probably a lot of random nuances to sort of what you're asked to do. For you being in that national team setup, what were they asking you to do that maybe was a little different than what you've been asked to do in other spaces in terms of, hey, you're playing this position for us. For us, that means this, this, and this. And then maybe you have your first priorities, second priorities, however they do it. For you personally, sort of, how did that role you were being asked to play, with the 19s differ from UNC or club or high school or whatever?
Yeah, well, the thing with like both college and US soccer is it's very important to be versatile because if you just want to be on the field, so no matter where they put you, like you kind of just have to adapt and learn. But pretty consistently throughout UNC and US soccer, I've been put either in the 7, 11, or 9. A little different than UNC though is they had me playing the 9 and 4-4-3, 4-3, and so that was a little different at UNC because we played 3-5-2.
Right.
So I kind of like interchanged in the 9 a little bit, which is a little bit more checking back, like using my body strength.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm a very play the ball through, take people on type player. So that was a little different for me, like getting
Yeah.
used to having defenders on my back to pressure.
Uh-huh.
But honestly, like just the biggest thing is like wherever they put you, like just saying yes and like adapting and I just whatever gets me on the field.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's crazy just because like literally the very, very, very best players in the world, like top 5, top 10 players in the world, where they're in the youth national team setup, don't even get to play their position. Like
Yeah.
Crystal Dunn is like my entire lifetime, and your entire lifetime is just like, yeah, no, she'll play outside back. I'm sure it's cool. She's only like one of the best attacking and
Yeah,
midfield players
exactly.
in the entire world. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, you as like an 18, 19-year-old, you're like, yeah, I think I'm going to say yes. I think
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, I'm super curious too. It's honestly been a little while since, and the staff probably might have honestly all turned over at this point since the last time I talked to a Minnesotan who was in these national team setups. I think, folks might remember, April Bakken, Nikki Albrecht, or more recently like Katie Duong. But the thing that I always felt was really interesting to me at the broader level, so like besides your role that you're playing, at the broader level, I've always found it really interesting to hear about sort of what the broader differences were in terms of how you were coached or like how they communicate or like I remember my show with April and Nikki, they talked about how the coaching staff and the federation was so obsessed with talking about the zones, like, okay, yeah, no, like once you get into zone 9, this is what you do. And it was all zone, 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 zone,
Yeah.
zone, which is not the type of verbiage, at least that we use at Equal Time. It's like beyond my tactical vocabulary. I'm sure Mark actually probably would know better than me, but even honestly, I don't know that colleges do the exact same. I don't know that it's so like zone, 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 zone.
Yeah.
But that's just one random example I remember in my bald brain. But for you, what were some of those differences at the broad strokes in terms of how it felt like you were being coached as a squad, and like were there differences than in other places you've been?
Yeah, well, like those other players said, I think at US Soccer, they focus really on the tactical part of the game.
Right.
So sometimes it can be like a little bit paralyzing because you're thinking so much tactically that it kind of paralyzes your game a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, my UNC coach talked to me about that going in.
Right.
Kind of like take it with a grain of salt, obviously listen and
Right.
be coachable, but also like just play your game.
Right.
But yeah, I would say like they talked a lot about like channels
Yeah.
and different zones as well.
Yeah.
And like we did even drills that were like you had to advance into these zones or had to have a certain amount of passes to advance into the zone. And so they
Right.
do very explicitly focus on the tactical side of the game,
Right.
which is a lot different than like what I focused on growing up, just because
Yeah.
I had my speed and I probably didn't focus on the tactics of the game as much as I should have.
Sure.
And so UNC and US Soccer has definitely been very helpful in that piece of my game just because,
Right.
I mean, they make you like look at film and analyze your game, analyze other games. So it's definitely been a very big piece of my game that has been improving because I've been in these programs.
Yeah. I mean, the way you phrased it is probably so important. The way your coach put it, which is, yes, obviously what you're being asked to do is what you should try to do.
Yeah.
But especially in national team setups at every level are just nuts. I mean, like being a national team coach is nuts. Being a national team player is nuts. Like the idea of how these teams succeed or fail or whatever, like being a national team coach or a national team player has like nothing to do with any other team you're on. There's
Yeah.
like, what other situation would you come in and practice for like 6 days, play a tournament for 9, and then like come back 6 months later? Like there's nothing to compare it to. So
Yeah.
the idea of like first national team camp, then they give you like 7 priority points to do as a forward, as a 9.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like, yeah, if you try to be perfect at what they said, you're going to be so locked up mentally.
Yeah.
Like it would probably take you like 3, 4, 5 camps before you were like, oh, I actually feel like I'm getting to priority 5 in this system. I feel like oh yeah, okay, now I'm mastering hold up. Okay, now I'm hitting the channel when they hit zone 6. Now I know what channel 2 and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, it would be so hard to just do both. So it's like not like you're ignoring it, but also, well, if I know I can just like run and score, I'm probably just gonna do
that. Exactly. And like one of the big differences is so at UNC, like we're told to just press. Like Anson just wants us to
Maddie, you're going right for my heart. You're just I am annoyingly and obsessively Mr. Press. I'm like, all of a sudden I'm going to be watching every UNC game. Oh my God. Keep going. Sorry.
So then I get to US Soccer and I'm just obviously taught to just hunt the ball, go and press. And they're like, whoa, let's slow down. And they like had to teach me how to go off of cues. So it's just like those like minor little differences of like adapting to their style of play. And it's been ingrained in me just throughout this whole season. So there was just like a couple of little things like that where I had to like make the adjustments.
Like, so in other words, UNC, the system is you're almost, and I'm going to overstate this, but you're almost permanently released where any frontline player is permanently released to be the one that triggers the press. So like for those that haven't asked 5 million press questions of coaches, for instance, a lot of the times the very basic 101 of a press is like, maybe rule 1 is when do we engage the press? So like are certain players allowed to cue the press, or are all of them allowed to? If there's one central forward, a lot of the times maybe that person is cueing. But the reason it matters is because the next step is almost always then how do you follow the person who cued? So like if the front line cues a press and they trigger it, if the midfield doesn't follow, you are so screwed.
Exactly. That was one of the problems at camp because I would just kind of go off on my own little by myself and like be trying to press, and like the midfield was like, where is she going? And so I had to like adjust.
But for the federation, like for the coaching staff, they do still allow you to release into it. They just they just tell you to live within a box. Like how did that go? Like what was the guidance of sort of when you want to release?
Well, so at UNC, I mean, Anson is always like, run yourself into the ground. I'll take you off if you need a sub.
Yeah,
I'm just sprinting.
We'll sub 5 players every 15 minutes.
Exactly.
We'll shift like crazy.
Yeah, so he likes to sub, so that's always like a big indicator of like we can press as much as we want. But in the US system, the subbing is limited. So it's basically like going off of cues and knowing if you can actually realistically win the ball.
Right.
And so it's honestly keeping a lower line. And for example, like if a center back is unsure of what to do with the ball, or they're playing between each other, like finding that blindside press where you can kind of come at an angle where they don't see you, like cues like that, whereas it's less of just like running around. But
like essentially they're saying you need to go only when you feel like you have a 60%, 70%, 75% chance of getting this ball. But you can't be running like you do at UNC because, like you said, at the most basic level, the subbing rules are just different. So like, that alone. So like the very hyper local Minnesota example for people is the way I talked about St. Thomas. So like Sheila at St. Thomas is fully, absolutely like run, like kill yourself running. We will sub every 7 minutes. We are going to line change hockey the shit out of this. We're going to just like 7 minutes. And we'll get into this a little bit when we talk about you at UNC and teams like that. It is like, actually, let's get into it right now. Let's jump into UNC. I think you played top. Let's start all the way at the top. You played a ton of games, 26 games, 4 goals, 3 assists. That is impressive just as a freshman campaign. So like any freshman in the country, if you do 4 goals and 3 assists, that is impressive.
Thank you.
It is particularly, and you ranged from games where you play 15 minutes, you would play 55 minutes, you come off the bench. It's very wide open. It's impressive for any freshman. It's particularly impressive to me at a place like UNC because your shifts can be short. Your shifts can be, you can shift a lot. You have games where you don't have that many minutes. And UNC, as we've very much implied and said, is known for like heavy shift subbing. So like very, lots of players see the field. You will go deep into the bench. Being on UNC means you are playing at UNC, like you are going to be asked to play. When you committed to UNC and you have all these ideas, and you're probably a very research heavy, thoughtful person. So maybe it went exactly how you thought it would go because you're that researched. But when you committed there and you knew it's this sort of shift heavy, sub heavy, press heavy, when you have this idea in your head and you daydream at night, like sunshine and rainbows, like freshman year, I'm going to come in, I'm going to be just crushing it. When you have these ideas of what you think it's going to be like, and then compare it to the freshman year you had, how did those things compare, and what were some of those differences?
Yeah, I think it's just honestly, my freshman year is a little bit of a roller coaster. I mean, coming in, like, you have hopes of playing, and realistically, I didn't think I would play that much, obviously, just because of the caliber of the program.
Totally.
I was hoping to just get adjusted to college soccer and kind of find my rhythm.
Yeah.
But at the beginning of the season, like, I wasn't getting very many minutes. I remember specifically, like, the Virginia game. I came in for, like, the last 5 minutes of the game.
Right.
And so that's, like, a way different role than my role was at the end of the season.
Totally.
But I think that, like, definitely, like, fueled my fire because I, like, actually realized what it would take to actually get on the field and get legit minutes, and I think that was kind of like an awakening for me. And it kind of pushed me, honestly, to push into getting more minutes into the end of the fall. And so honestly, in the beginning of the season, I was just grateful to be getting on the field and just, like, at least seeing how it was to be out there, like, the speed of play and everything. But I definitely think it was an awakening in the beginning of the season. I mean, it's just such a jump from high school to college soccer. So
what's the biggest jump? I mean, because you played essentially as high level high school and club that can be played, or certainly in Minnesota, you're playing in the highest pressure, state championships, blah, 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 all these things, playing in front of hundreds of college coaches at your club games, all this crap. But for you, what were those biggest jumps to the college level?
I think everyone's strong, everyone's fast, and everyone has the ability to play quickly. So, like, the speed of play, I think, is just the biggest piece. And then second piece, I mean, it's going to sound so cliche and, like, everyone says it, but fitness.
Yeah.
I think is just such a huge piece because the game is at a sprint at all times.
Yeah.
So I think that was just the biggest adjustment. Was I was used to being able to have, like, full capacity the entire game, and then I'm, like, tired after 5 minutes of being on the field. So I think that was just the biggest difference.
That's the only, and I really try to not use my own sports memories because it's really truly doesn't matter. And at this point, it was 50 years ago. The example when you said, like, I'm used to being able to go the whole time and I was tired after 5 minutes. The example I always give is, like, when I was a 7th grader in track, and I went to grew up in a tiny town in Walker, northern Minnesota, and the track meets are 7th through 9th grade. And 7th grade boy compared to 9th grade boy, I remember running the mile against 9th graders. And you run and you're like, oh, so I just sprint this whole mile?
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it's crazy. I mean, it shows you the level, the college game that I don't know. We try to elevate it a lot at equal time, but, like, aside from the fact of just being everyone is good and everyone is, physically fit and blah, 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 I also do think it's probably not talked about enough, the idea that you come in as a freshman and you're competing against players who have been in the lifting program for 2 or 3 or 4 years. You're competing against players who have done that in season and off season. They come in with a frame, they build onto it, they learn how to use their frame, they strengthen even within that frame. And then for a player like you that's like 5'9", you already, for sure, already felt like you had an advantage, like being a tall, strong player. And then you go into this place where you're like, what the hell? These center backs are jacked. Like, this sucks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, and you actually, one other thing you mentioned in your first UNC answer is just that early in the season, you had these games where, like, you're playing what is usually referred to as garbage time, like the
Mhm.
final 5 minutes of a game, or at least that's like the basketball reference. And you come in, and it was just a eye opener for you, and just motivated you to work harder. I think we shouldn't really skip past the fact that like taking a moment of hardship like that and using it as a positive motivator is not a guarantee, and it's not that common. Like I cover a lot of college players where, you know, I'm very pro portal, very pro player. Like we are blindly and aggressively pro player at equal
Mhm.
time. Like you are asked to commit to a college at like 16 and then
Yeah.
go there as like a 18 to 22-year-old. And by the way, college coaches have like absurd levels of power. So like if a player wants to leave, like we are very accepting of that. But
Mhm.
one of the several reasons why players want to leave is if they get there and they don't immediately have a perfect role, or what they view as an optimal role, they say, well, this coach doesn't like me, like this sucks.
Yeah.
I should be a starter. I'm a close to full scholarship or full scholarship player. How the hell am I not starting? And then they want to leave because they want a better situation. And then the other way to it, and by the way, sometimes that's very valid, like all
Mhm.
support, sometimes that's valid.
Yeah.
But players like you, I think, are pretty rare. And the thing that all coaches want, which is it's hard. You're a freshman. It's
Mhm.
literally game 3 or something. Realize you just need to try fine tuning like 1.5 points. And then literally only by the end of the season, you're like crushing it and scoring 2 goals. You're scoring a brace like in the Sweet 16. So I
Mhm.
think, like, talk about, do you ever have moments? Obviously, you are naturally wired, I think, to be a very motivated, self-motivated person. But do you have moments where you do the opposite, where you find yourself sort of giving up because there's hardship, and then having to remind yourself that, like, no, you're a badass, like go in, train harder? Like, are you so built to try hard that you are always self-motivated, or do you have those moments of doubt where then you think of those later, as a way to self-motivate?
Yeah, I think, the biggest example I can use was obviously the beginning of the season when I wasn't getting a ton of minutes. I think I was obviously pretty upset, and I
Yeah,
just remember talking to my parents about it,
yeah,
and they were very encouraging of me trying to change my mindset on it,
right,
instead of complaining, like, "What are you gonna do about it?"
right,
And I think, over the course of the season, like, I was able to see how much growth, I had taken just from a fall season, and then I honestly feel like, the spring season was even better for me because I got a
right,
ton of one-on-one time with my coaches,
uh-huh,
and we were like, the spring games obviously matter, but they, are allowing you to make mistakes and try things and connecting with your teammates.
right,
So, and I was able to see that growth, like, it honestly it doesn't allow my mindset to go negative because I know that I'm getting better and I'm being pushed every day here, and, like, these US camps wouldn't have been possible without
right,
me learning and growing throughout this year, and so I think, yeah, there was definitely a time in the beginning of the year where I was questioning, I need to go somewhere where I'm
yeah,
actually playing, but I
totally,
think, like, obviously coming from my parents, and then, I went to the coaches, and, they were very supportive, and, um, the competitive cauldron, which is at UNC, like, it provides you with feedback, and so there's no hiding from anything. So, I mean, coming in as a freshman, like, you're not necessarily at the top of those tables, and so
right,
I think it's just, like, taking that feedback and using it and using the coaches, and just, like, honestly, like I said, like, if I wouldn't have grown this year and stayed at UNC this year, like, I would have not be where I am.
right.
So
I Yeah, I mean, well, especially a player like you literally were talking to 25 to 50 colleges that were like, you'll be our starting forward day one. We're locking you in. You'll play as much as you want. Like, you for sure have that in the back of your head, because you literally had coaches being like, you're going to be our star. We're going to play you right away. You're going to be so good. But we'll skip past that. I think we do need to note, you're going to have to explain what the competitive cauldron is, because you can't just drop, like a detail from Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire and not like explain exactly. I'm assuming, based on context clues, I have great reading and verbal comprehension. I'm assuming the competitive cauldron is like a running thing of like your performance based on the data bands, based on this other stuff, based on your core stats, whatever. But actually explain it so I'm not guessing what the wizard does with this cauldron.
So, at our practice fields, we have a bulletin board, that has the actual competitive cauldron on it and is updated every day. It's a combination of, I mean, there's so many things on it, but GPS data, so accelerations, work rate, miles, distance covered,
Yeah.
all that stuff is a category. And then there's attacking pieces, so heading, finishing, passing accuracy, shooting power. I mean, there's so many categories.
Shooting power.
Yeah.
You have the cleat stuff, the boot stuff.
Yeah, and they use, like, radar guns too to test our shooting power, so and then there's defending, so, I mean, we do a culmination of 1v1s
Uh-huh.
that are ranked, they're called half field games, which is, like, 6v6,
Yeah.
and we do drafts, so your draft is ranked, and then
What's
also
what's the draft? Running with a parachute, or what's a draft?
it's, no, it's not. It's, like, drafting players, so
Like,
yeah,
where you're picked?
so it's, like
Where you're picked during recess gets put on
yeah.
this board?
Exactly. Yeah, and then I don't what else? Yeah, like heading distance, like there's just
Whoa.
categories, but
Where
it's all displayed for everyone, so there's no hiding.
where you're picked. Wow, that is actually the single detail that is blowing my mind.
Yeah.
That's by the way, the team is successful. Anything Anson does, I'm sure we should all be mimicking and copying. I will
Mhm.
say, very few individual details that I hear are so ripe for drama as where you're picked being put in.
I know.
I love. Well, wait. So when you're when you're having those tough moments, you mentioned using your parents. Obviously, Equal Time is also as blindly pro player. We also hype up the parents all the time. What do the moms think is an active segment for Equal Time? So when we're in the Dominican, trust me, Maddie's mom will be on Equal Time.
Awesome,
Don't worry, people. Don't worry. So very pro parent, and like you said, they were a huge resource for you of just sort of helping you stay productive, like not even just positive, helping you stay productive, which is if something's wrong, what can you do about it, which is just a healthy mental reset. But for you, that's sort of an exterior support, that's an outside the team support. For you, were there certain players that you were able to sort of go to, or were you able to go to even another attacker or just another random fellow freshman who's maybe you say to them, you're like, I'm not playing that much, and they're like, yeah, I'm not playing at all. Like, what's the sort of internal way the team culture stuff of
Yeah.
because I think the thing people don't appreciate is how players respond to not having the role they want is essentially one of the very foundational pieces of what a team culture is.
Yeah.
Because not every player will ever have the role they want. Like a third or half the team will have a role they think is less than what they should have.
Yeah.
And how they grapple with it with each other dictates the entire vibe of the team.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and you would think too, like with the competitive cauldron and all of our stats being displayed, it definitely pins people against each other.
Right. Totally.
So I was obviously like a little nervous about that just because all the players on the team are obviously high caliber players and can go anywhere else and play.
Right.
And so I was worried about that going in, but it is honestly like the complete opposite. Like there is not a more supportive environment I've ever been in. And Anson always says like we need to celebrate other successes.
Right.
And so like people are just always happy for each other. And I obviously connected closely with a bunch of our senior class.
Yeah.
I'm pretty close with Tori Hansen. She's playing with Orlando Pride right now.
Yeah, no big deal. Yeah.
No big deal, yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because people actually called us twins because we look so similar.
This is a common challenge in college soccer, people. This is the hairstyle, body frame. This is a challenge because, for example, I watch most games from 300 feet away up on the top of the stands. It is very challenging when we have these like-heighted, like-haired, similar sized players. This is a challenge.
Mm-hmm. And so, like, being able to go to that older class who had experience under their belt.
Right.
I mean, I was really close with Julia Dorsey as well. She plays lacrosse at UNC too, which is just insane. I don't know how she does that. But
we'll get into dual sport later, Maddie. You are not going to be off the hook on that. We'll get
so being able to just bounce ideas off if I had any questions or any concerns. And honestly, I mean, speaking to Tori's experience, she didn't play her first 3 years and then started her senior year, had a remarkable year. But I mean, she had been through those hardships. And so, like, going to her about that stuff was really relatable to her.
Right.
And so, honestly, like, we joke about it all the time. Like, next year won't be the same without the senior class. Like, they were just amazing and part of the reason we were able to go so far. But no, like, they definitely, like, created a culture on the team that was putting each other first and putting the team first. And
right.
I mean, it is one of the most cutthroat environments I've ever been a part of, but the ability of our team to be able to rally and just, you know, be cohesive is like, just, it like blows my mind how, like, our ability to connect and be just one together.
And I mean, you tell this story about Tori not playing for 3 years, and then she plays as a fourth year, and now she's literally a pro. I mean, I think we try to echo this. I don't know if I echo it enough. It's like not playing for the first year, playing the second year, or well, especially if you're a defender, good Lord, but anyone, it's very normal. Like, not playing for a year or two is like especially if you go to a good team. Like, if you go to a good team, it's, you know, and if you're anywhere in Power 5, that's super normal. Anywhere at any level is super normal. And like, if you're a player out there, and you have, obviously, thousands of players are watching the show. We know that the viewership is off the charts. So many players are watching. If you're a player watching or listening, that's absurdly normal. Like, it's very normal to not play right away and then still go on to be successful, either as a college athlete or then even as a pro. Like, you literally have an example like Maddie just gave you, or someone's playing in the NWSL. There's like 5 roster spots in the whole league, and she's playing in it. Like, are you kidding me? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah. Like, crazy.
It's just, and I do think, you know, we do need to give chops for there being that sort of positive culture. It takes a really long time to build a strong culture in a college program. Players rotate every few years. You have to build the foundation of a good culture first in order for the new players to experience it and carry it on. It takes years and years and years to build a good culture.
Yeah.
And it's so valuable because, like, college soccer cosmetically as a thing to do, like, yes, it's fun to play. Yes, games are fun. Like, winning is fun. Like, being able to play the sport you love is fun. But like, as a thing to spend time doing, it can suck. Like, it is so hard. It is, the grind of the college soccer season is absurd.
Yeah.
You, like, the travel, like, just if you were doing it as an athlete, it would be brutal. And then you all are taking like freaking 19 credits. Like, all of you are insane. Like, it is crazy what you go through. And so it's like, to have a positive culture doing that absurd, like, marathon sprint that college soccer is like, how, I have no idea how programs do it. Like, college, I say this to so many people. Like, when people watch summer league teams that are really fun and like there's tons of fans and like, oh, they're playing so free and fun. It's like, no kidding, they're playing like it's fun.
Yeah.
It's not college.
Exactly.
College is so hard. Like, college soccer is so hard.
Yeah.
It is just like, I think I just, you know, I'm laughing and I'm obviously absurd and I'm a clown, but like, I talk about it because there's so many mental health challenges with so many women soccer players. There's been tragedies that have occurred in soccer and other sports. And the reason I try to name it, and we try to name it at Equal Time, is there's a reason those tragedies are happening. And it's because the situations are pressure packed. They are pressure packed for everyone as a group. They are pressure packed for everyone individually. And then when stuff gets hard, like you had at that beginning of the season, it's really easy for that to spiral for people. Like, you're starting as like, you're at college like at 18 and you're like literally on like national TV and you're like trying to be a national teamer and you're like 8. It's crazy. So I don't know. It's huge. And I don't know if you had a sense of there being a good culture going. I mean, every coach says like, we want to have a good culture, blah, 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 blah. But like, I don't know if you had a good sense from your visit or other stuff. Like, was that one of the biggest surprises, that the culture itself was positive?
Yeah, so like I said, like I was obviously a little nervous going in
Yeah.
about that because I'm obviously like super competitive and I know the other girls are equally as competitive.
Mhm.
But I think that was just the most attractive thing to me was that I knew I was going to be with competitive girls and so
Right.
I mean they were going to push me and I was going to push them. But
Right.
obviously I was a little worried about that, but when I visited and went to the ID camp, which was how I got on campus because this was all like during COVID.
Oh my God.
So it was crazy. Like I decided to go this ID camp in February before COVID happened in March.
Right.
And I went to the ID camp. The girls were super welcoming, like super nice. And obviously, you don't have like a glimpse into the actual culture until
Right.
you're experiencing it.
Right.
But I just wanted to be at the most competitive place with the most competitive players.
Yeah.
So
You just wanted to go and be a Terminator. That's cool. It's like, yeah, you're a stone cold killer. You want to be one of the killers. I get it. I get it. And we've talked about your transition a little bit, and you said you had a little bit of anxiety, but honestly, the season went super well. Although I am curious, Maddie, if there were any sort of welcome to D1 moments, like say for instance, like eating shit during a crossing drill. Is this a story? Is this a story we need to hear about?
Yeah, it is a story. So it was pretty rainy,
Okay.
and we were at practice, and this was pretty early on. So
Yeah.
obviously, I'm still like pooping my pants on my way to practice. Like
Yeah.
I'm so nervous,
You're
and
still
so
getting used to the powder blues. You're still like,
we're doing this crossing drill where a girl's getting end line, crossing it back, and
mhm.
it's a 1v1 with the keeper. So you're supposed to be finishing these shots.
Yeah,
And Damon's and Anson are watching, and well, we have these statisticians who keep stats on every single drill we do.
sure. Of
So
course.
I mean, I'm just like trying to
For the
score
cauldron.
for the cauldron.
For the
And
cauldron.
so Anson and Damon are watching, and I'm doing like fine, pretty well. I'm getting a little angry because my shots aren't going as well as I'd like to.
Sure.
And so I'm just like, I'm just gonna hit this, smash it as hard as I can. I go and I slip completely 2 feet, and I hit my head, my butt in front of everyone. And it was honestly made me feel more comfortable because everyone was just dying laughing. And Anson is just in the corner, like his arms like on his hips, just staring at me. And I'm like, this would happen.
You're just like you full cartoon character.
Exactly.
Full
Yeah.
yoink, full yoinks.
Yep. Yeah, and I actually so all of our, practices are filmed, so I went back to go and watch it, and it looked even worse on film. I was like, "I cannot watch this."
Maddie, it's like you can send that to us if the UNC coaches are watching, if another UNC player is watching and they have access to the Speedio or whatever the hell you guys use.
Maybe not.
Force it to equal time. We will keep it anonymous. As everyone knows, when people source us random like video that was not streamed, I don't think we've ever broken confidence. Source us that clip.
Yeah, I don't think you would think I was much of an athlete anymore after seeing that.
I sort of want to offer money like live for it. Let's just say you will be rewarded if someone wants to source us that clip. By the way, no one is watching this show other than your family and my family. No one's watching the show. So I do want to dig in a little bit too. You talked about you already know all of your stats because of course they're on the cauldron. So we don't need to talk about them a ton. But if folks want to know, don't worry. They are all good as expected. Good passer, good dribbler. Not really any cards because obviously you're so disciplined, except for the one rogue situation that happened against Dominion. We won't talk about it. One that sticks out to me though is that you do get a couple fouls a game, which I like, which is great. Because you are like so disciplined, but also as you said on the show, you were competitive as hell. And I went back and looked at some of the tape, looked back, tried to watch some film. You do have sort of a fun tendency to just like maybe you use your shoulder just a little bit.
Drop a little shoulder.
Maybe you give them a little bit of help. If they want to go to the ground, you're not going to stop them from going to the ground. Give them a little bit of a lean. So there's a few of those which are really good. But I am really curious for you, how many of those when you're in sort of that foul environment are a thing where you truly are just deciding to foul a player? You know, like I think people probably don't get that there's people getting pissed off and fouling someone, and then there's people sort of deciding like, I'm going to challenge the hell out of this player, and if it's a foul, it's a foul. But I'm, that basically there are moments where you're intellectually choosing to do a foul, and there's moments where your like monkey brain comes out and you're just like, oh, and you want to foul someone. For you, what's the sort of split of those for you? How frequently is it I'm deciding that I'm going to play physical and maybe it'll be a foul versus screw this player, I'm going to foul the shit out of them because I'm pissed off. So what's like the split for you?
Obviously, like, I do like to challenge on the ball, so I'm going to get into it with a defender, and most of the time I'm not obviously trying to foul, but I mean, there are instances where me and a girl will be going at it all game. I mean, I remember the Notre Dame game, the Elite Eight. I think we were up 2-0. Did we win? I think we won 2-0. And there were about like 2 minutes left in the game. And we had the game, like, we were just trying to control possession, but the other team had the ball. And the center back had been going at me all game. And I thought I should have gotten a PK on one of the calls. And so 2 minutes left, I absolutely take her out, and I get a yellow card. And my coaches sub me off, and Damon, my assistant, was like, really? Because in the tournament, like, if you get a yellow card, it's scary because if you get another one, like, you can't play the next game.
Right.
I was like, sorry, my bad. Like, sometimes you just can't control it.
And listen, the other very good stat that I'm going to call out has nothing to do with your scoring prowess and your attacking prowess. You have, and again, this is, who knows if this is accurate. This is in Y Scouts. I have no idea if like your 7 stat keepers at UNC counted differently than this. But you had, this is the best. I only when things like this stick out, you had 1 slide tackle attempt and it was successful. So you have 100% slide tackle rate, but it's 1 out of 1. It was like against Old Dominion, I think. And so when stuff like that happens, it's so great because that's why you notice so much that you're like you're a tall player. So you're using your frame usually.
Yeah.
Well, like you aren't just like going to ground Wisconsin style and just like slide. So yeah, it does stick out. And you did mention those competitive moments when you're an attacker against those center backs. Well, I guess you probably also have a little bit more freedom because you're an attacker, so your fouls are way down there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Versus like if a right back had your kind of attitude, it'd be like, well, maybe chill out. Maybe chill out.
Exactly.
I have heard, and you gave us a little taste of it there, that you can be a little bit competitive. You can do a little bit of trash talking, especially in like a high pressure situation, like a soccer pig game, which of course we know the stakes are so high. Like a random game of soccer pig.
Yeah.
But does that trash talking, not just the competitive part, not just the shove someone to the ground part, does the trash talking ever come out when you're in those powder blues at UNC? Like, for instance, against like Duke or whoever you hate. I don't know who UNC hates in soccer. Is it everyone in the triangle? Is it like them and Wake, and then you by law you have to hate them? Does the trash talking ever come out? Does it come out?
To be honest, I'm not like a huge trash talker. I'm more a trash talker when I'm with people I'm comfortable with, like family, friends. It takes a lot to get a little bit of trash talking out of me. I kind of just like to let the playing do the talking. But that reminds me of the Duke UNC game.
Yeah.
Where the double middle fingers came out. That was an instance where there was a little bit of trash talking. I think.
This is probably something that's very well known to UNC people, and I just didn't track it. I'm assuming it's not you that double birded someone.
No.
This is a random other player like double birds up someone.
Yeah, so a Duke player double birded one of our teammates.
Oh, maybe I do remember that. Maybe this made like semi-viral social media stuff, right?
It was crazy. But those games, I mean, whenever we play Duke, honestly, any ACC team, it's definitely heated. But the Duke game, there's definitely there was an instance where, I mean, they were just fouling my other forward, and then I got into it a little bit. But honestly, like, I'm not a huge trash talker.
Okay. We'll just eventually I'll play you in an activity, and we'll see. We'll play, like, I don't know, whatever, pickleball, something where you will crush no, actually, We'll have you play Danny Foxhoven instead. Every idea I have where either Mark or I would do something for equal time, now all I ever think is like, why would we have us do it? Danny could do it. Like, yeah. Why would we put us on camera when like Danny Foxhoven could be the person doing it?
Yeah, exactly.
Why show a low talent mid-30s balding man when we like, Danny could do it? She'll be so much better. It'll be so much better. Everyone will enjoy it more, including her. So it's like, why not just do it?
Yeah.
All right, we will do a quick break to let everyone know, and as the graphics show, look how professional we are. This show is brought to you by Pentz Homes. Whether you're buying or selling a house, Maddie, when you eventually buy your house, when you go pro and need a realtor, or if folks are looking to do projects in their current home, Nate and Lydia can help you find what you need. Need financing for a basement remodel, looking to add a second bath, like we are, my wife and I, in a Pentz home, or even adding a workspace now that you're working from home. Pentz Homes and their preferred lender, Angie Shear, with Luminate Financing, and help you find the right financing tool. Go to pentzhomes.com to learn more, or find them on social media at Pentz Homes. Quick shout out, the house you could almost see through this window is for sale. If someone wants to live right next to me, shoot me a DM. We need cool neighbors, so that's necessary. All right, Maddie, we have somehow gone this entire show basically without talking about your goal scoring. So we are going to have to dive in, because I do kind of want to fanboy a little bit. If you may think I already have been, but now we are actually going to get into it. We said earlier you had 4 goals and 3 assists, which, if people, again, do not follow college soccer, very strong freshman campaign, even before you factor in doing it for a very top program where there's competition for minutes. It's crazy. Shifts are short, etc. But I am even more impressed by the way you scored these goals. So if you go back and watch these goals, all of them, I think, were scored in an entirely different way, like fully different run of play, fully different part of the field, fully different skill set for you. So in no order, because Y-Scout puts them in a very random order. It actually might be reverse order. First one we see, trailing run. There's a ball into the box. You're playing BYU, so I guess Sweet 16 probably. Ball into the box. Player makes a shot attempt, comes off either the post or a save, I can't remember. You have a really nice trailing run where you stay precisely in the pocket of space, volley finish, in for a goal, beauty, huge celebration. Second goal we see, you're serving as this check option at the top of the box, so you're not really, if people think of sort of a traditional like 9, in this instance, you're actually sort of in the position of maybe like an 8 or a 10. You're kind of a trailing option, top of the box. Receive it. Perfect, like this slide touch outside of your foot. I'm going to tweet this video. Perfect, like slide the ball, put it on your strong foot, rip it like slide it to the left post. Just fantastic use of spacing. Great. Again, staying in the pocket, but a completely different play than the first one. Next one, this great hold up ball. A center back chucks it at you like 50 yards, like a 50-yard ball, 60-yard ball, like across the entire field. You just chest settle, like straight down to your feet, which, by the way, I'm assuming that at least has some kind of impact of just like the shit out of your chest. Yeah. Chest settle right down to your feet. Immediately, you go at a defender beater. Second defender, go at them, go right by, and just like rocket goal. So just another completely different goal. And then the one that I think maybe the most people saw, well, the NCAA tournament ones people saw, but the one that I remember seeing circulated more is this one where UNC turns it over around midfield. You're sort of like just beyond the center of the field, but you're making a central run. Beautifully, perfectly slotted ball where it's just beyond a pit defender. You go through, you hold a defender on your right shoulder, beat a defender on your left shoulder, and just slide it home past the keeper, which like that goal was like just dirty. But just completely different finishes. For you, you grow up being, you've said earlier, you're so fast, like, you're so fast, you have all this speed. How did you get to actually develop those different finishing packages? Because when you grow up being if you are just naturally faster than everybody, it is insanely easy to never develop a touch game. Like there are actual pro players that live their entire life, like Jordan Morris. Like there are players that are literally middle linebackers that happen to be fast, and they have bricks for feet, like Jassy Zardes. Like, there are players who are just like brick-footed track athletes who never work a touch game and are worldly successful. For you, sort of, where did that talent development start, or how do you focus on that? Is that in your individual work outside of team stuff? Like, when did you start trying to develop that sort of touch package so that you could scale your game?
I remember in the first exhibition game, we were playing VCU, and I got across, used a little bit of deception, and then opened up my body, and I was probably 5 yards away from goal.
Yeah.
And I ended up opening my body and hit the right post.
Yeah.
And I think that was eye-opening for me because it was a sitter that I should have put away. And so then I was in a little bit of a funk for a while, those first couple games, because I was pissed and I wanted to just like get that first goal under my belt.
Yeah.
And so Damon, my assistant, was joking with me. He was like, I know you can score, like, so just breathe and like let it happen. And so specifically with that pit goal, I think that was like where it kind of started for me. Just getting that first one under my belt was just like a huge relief. I mean, I remember that's what that picture is from that you did. Like, it was just like joy and relief. I was just like, okay, like I can breathe. And it was a like awesome goal. Like, it was just great. My parents were there, which was like amazing. Like, all my parents. So it was just like just a great first goal. And then once I kind of got that, I was able to settle in a little more.
Yeah.
I think, like you said, like I had to develop different ways of scoring.
Yeah.
So I'm used to just taking a touch and slotting it into the left post.
Totally.
And so I think varying my runs, I mean, combining in order to get in on goal. But I mean, the keepers obviously at this level are definitely better. So just fine-tuning my finishing, I mean, it's just getting those extra reps after practice.
Right.
But I think Damon, my assistant coach, has been just really great, and he doesn't want me to just be a fast player. Like, he wants to have other things that I have in my toolbox, you know, combining with the players around me. And like, he always says to me that he doesn't want me to end up like a Lynn Williams, where I'm just like using my speed. Like, actually,
it would be really terrible for you to turn out like Lynn Williams.
He just uses that as an example, but I think like
what a terrible fate.
She's amazing, but I think he just wants me to be able to be
totally
a very different and versatile player who can not be known. He always says not be known as a fast player, but a fast soccer player. So.
And honestly, he's not wrong. The reason you want more options, like more tools in your toolbox, isn't because you will always need them. It's because if you rely only on speed, then you need to always have that speed. So like, I actually think, like I mentioned players who are wildly successful, and Lynn Williams, frankly, is more successful than either of the bros I mentioned. But like, being a fast player actually can be your thing. Like, it can be someone's thing, like in general. Like, you actually can live, especially as a pure striker, as being the one who just like outruns center backs.
Yeah.
You can be that. But having the bag, like having the full scoring bag, means that then you're like reducing this margin of error. You're saying, okay, well, what if a team always plays me at wing and I actually never have a chance to run on? Like, what if I literally always have to receive the ball at the frickin' corner in like half court offense, and I receive it in the corner, and all I can do is like, my only option is cross or dribble. And it's like, if I have no dribble game, then I'm just completely marginalized, you know? So I do appreciate the part of it. Although I will say, when someone's as fast as you actually can kind of just be fast. But I love that you are way more than being fast, for sure. And as is very common in this show, we start from the present and we just continue going back in time. And so we've reached the point where I have to ask you about your college recruitment process. Like, I have to imagine it was just like 1% of people, less than 1% of people experience that type of situation. Like, even players who go D1 do not all experience the type of thing you experience, which is just like dozens, if not hundreds, of college coaches at your club games. People, like, by the time communication is open, the sheer volume of bullshit emails, calls, letters that you'd be getting is like when you watch a silly movie from when I'm a teenager and they show these recruits like emptying a bag of like letters, and now thankfully email exists. But like it's that level of recruiting is what you went through, of just like kooky cartoon levels of like attention. For you, what was that process like? How did you even approach it? Like, what was your sort of, when you knew, okay, this date is when it opens and blah, 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 like, what was your strategy to even survive that era?
Yeah, well, honestly, like, I had no idea that I was gonna get, like, reached out from, like, the Carolinas of,
Right.
soccer. Like, I was just hoping to
Right.
get a couple calls under my belt and start talking to some schools.
Like,
But, I
you
mean,
literally get practice at doing it.
yeah, and so, like, I was just so grateful that I had, like, some of these bigger schools reach out.
Right.
I was honestly just, like, in shock, to be quite truthful. Like, I was like, "These schools are calling me? Like, this
Right.
is crazy."
Right.
And honestly, like, my parents did, like, a super good job of making sure I did my due diligence before researching colleges, and then, obviously, like, I had done a bunch of, like, the Go for ID camps, and, I did a Northwestern one, and so, like, kinda
Right.
just, like, feeling out a bunch of different campuses and seeing what I wanted from a school perspective.
Right.
Like, getting down to that February ID camp in North Carolina, I got to see, like, a more of a Southern school, like, a different feel.
Right.
So it was kinda just, like, preparing myself, and then after, June 15th, it was more just, like, kinda looking at my priorities and, like, making a, like, top list of, like,
Yeah.
what schools I wanted to pursue, and then, um, I was just so grateful to have the ability to even, like, talk to some of, like, these amazing coaches I had, like, idolized growing up.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, when Damon reached out to me on June 15th, he reached out to me, like, pretty early, like, 9 AM, and I was like, no one else, like, I'm prioritizing that call. Like, I just knew when I went to the February ID camp, like, it was, like, the place for me, and I think, obviously, I was open to learning about all the other schools and what they had to offer, but I
Right.
knew in the back of my head that, like, Carolina was, like, where I wanted to be.
Right.
But yeah, it was a honestly, like, just such an amazing process, and, like, to be able to do it with my family by my side,
Yeah.
and, it was just, yeah, it was, like, super fun, honestly.
Super fun. Oh, you're too resilient. You're too like you're too savvy. Of course it was fun for you. I I would imagine it would be, to be honest, at a certain point, just exhausting too. Like when you, so I believe the way, there's so many kooky, like quirky things about how this works. Like when you, even when you say the phrase, when Damon calls me at blank time and day, even for instance, the most minute detail is like very silly in this instance. I think the way they get your number, I believe, and I'm gonna say this, and I believe this is how it works based on like how it happens in the real world and based on the rules, is they are allowed to talk to your coaches
Mhm.
before the restricted date or whatever the date. So June 15 of your like sophomore year or whatever. They're allowed to talk to your coaches beforehand. And so all of this chit chat can be happening of like, they're talking to whoever and they're talking to whoever of like coach, 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 coach.
Yeah.
And so in that period, they probably have to ask the coach,
Mhm.
can I get this player's number so that when I'm allowed to talk to the player, I will call this number, but I won't use it before then. Don't worry, you won't break rules.
Yeah.
But so since you didn't necessarily expect the level of volume you ended up getting, and by the way, I don't think people have like home phones anymore, but like, was it your personal cell? Like,
Yeah, it was my cell phone.
so like after that date, like the date happens and now coaches are allowed to talk to you. Are you literally just like the weirdest 16-year-old in the world where you're hanging out with friends and you're like going to a movie or you're going to like get food or you're like hanging out at the lake and blah, blah, blah. and you're just like, oh, sorry, like 7 more middle-aged men just texted me. So I can send it to, like what is, like your phone is your phone just like trash after that? Like, are you just like, I mean, like, are you literally just getting like 100 texts a day? Like, is it just like that level of bullshit?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, it was pretty crazy just because, like, obviously the June 15th was the date it all opened, so
Right.
that's when, like, all the college coaches are prioritizing to talk to you.
So June is shot. June is shot at this point. Summer is ruined. Summer is ruined. We have to like throw this phone in a lake, huck it into the river, like it is dead. Wow. I can't even imagine. I mean, and I'm sure it's not even really worth asking you who was talking to you, because I think like probably every Power Five, like certainly every Midwestern Power Five was absolutely trying to get you. And then I'm sure once they heard that, like, well, UNC's actually making a pretty good offer to her, like then they're all like, all right, well, let's just like, whatever. But did you do well, I guess it was during COVID, so I don't know, did you even do more official visits after that camp?
Yeah, so the tough thing was all of these schools that were, like, kind of in my final 5, like, that's who
Yeah.
you probably want to go visit.
Right.
The tough thing was it was COVID, so I wasn't able to do that, so a
Right.
lot of the schools were giving me virtual visits,
Yeah.
which, like, isn't really the same thing. I mean,
No,
you can't really get a feel at all.
no.
So, I mean, it is kind of, like, a little weird to think about how, like, I was only able to visit Carolina.
Yeah.
Because, like, it was hard to tell the coaches who I was saying no to that I had already visited Carolina, that's why I was committing there. But they were like, "Oh, you haven't come and visited here." But it was, like, just this tough thing of where I didn't really have a choice. And so, obviously, too, with these offers comes, like, a timeline, and so I
Totally.
was never going to be able to visit those schools, but I just had loved Carolina, luckily,
Yes.
so much that it didn't really matter, but it
Yeah.
was definitely tough because my parents definitely, made it a priority for me that I needed to go and actually see the campus and
Sure.
see myself as a student, I mean, injuries happen, stuff happens, like, you need to actually enjoy
Totally.
the school and actually prioritize your academics.
Yeah.
So they were very adamant about actually loving the campus itself. So
Right.
I was just so grateful I even happened to have gotten to Carolina before that had all happened.
Right. Well, and did you have, I personally think, I mean, plenty of players I talk to actually do know the job they want by the time they're freshmen, which is like wild to me. But I like, as someone who's a weird, kooky, bizarre adult professional, but for you, did you have certain academic things you were looking for? Like, was it just, other than just like the general academic quality of an institution, was there certain stuff you sort of, when you say you had your priorities, you said that a while back, was it like certain programs or like,
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, my aspirations of hopefully, like, if I have the opportunity to play professional soccer,
yeah,
like, that's always been a goal of mine.
totally.
But my parents have always prioritized getting a degree and making sure you have something after soccer.
Hmm.
I'm still, like, unsure about what I want to do, just because I like to explore and, like, see
Yeah.
different things. I went in a biology major because I was really interested in physical therapy.
Okay.
Just being able to stay connected, like, staying active, like, that was very interesting to me. So I've been taking, like, a bunch of exercise science classes,
Right.
and obviously, like, the pre-med route at UNC is amazing.
Hmm.
And so that was obviously attractive, but I think just honestly finding a school that was gonna challenge me academically and,
Sure.
I mean, having a degree from UNC is amazing, so just finding a school that was able to push me in that
Yeah.
regard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is funny. Like I've talked to players when they're doing this recruiting stuff, and this is not to blanket shit on the SEC, but I have players who have told me stories about like they go visit a random SEC school and like an entire day and a half visit, like academics literally not one time were even fake mentioned.
Yeah.
Like that level of like, you just wouldn't even ever see that at like a Big Ten
Yeah.
and probably not even an ACC, but like you like
Yeah, well, even, like,
to not
rea
even like pretend that they're also students is so funny.
yeah, even realistically too, like, honestly, if I were to apply to UNC without soccer, like there's no way I would have been able to
Well, now we're being so humble. Now, Maddie, we're being humble. We're getting
realistically, definitely not. But so that's like honestly true. Like you have to find honestly like athletics opens up opportunities, and so finding a university where I can get an amazing education, which maybe wouldn't be possible without soccer, is like a big piece too.
That's great. Well, and it's also the thing of like you work really hard to get to a point where you're getting offered, you know, what might be close to free or fully free education. And so the education you actually get for it, then you feel like, well, if I'm getting literally like 6 figures worth of value out of this, I want to make sure I'm actually maximizing that value. You know, it's like whether you end up literally being a doctor or not, like you said, having the degree, having the experience, getting challenged, whatever, like it's very cool. Obviously, this is where I will plug that the hard sciences are overrated. And, players should really get into political stuff and government, and then I will totally just like get you into the field. So this is where I plug, and then your parents DM me later and they're like, please shut the hell up. What are you doing? She's going to be a doctor. Like, stop.
Exactly.
But I'll just make the plug. Everyone needs to know that working in politics is super great, obviously. All right, we're going to go back even farther back to the Edina days. We're throwing it back all the way. Obviously, people can tell from my cutoff jean shorts and Northern Minnesota Classic 2 club soccer roots that I have a lot of cred in Edina. I have a lot of connections there, so people know that.
Awesome.
People know that, obviously. Actually, I grew up in Walker on Leech Lake, so there's actually a lot of Edina people up there. So I actually do have a lot of connections. So we have some, in other words, I have some great stuff to ask you, Maddie, because I have great Edina sources. So we're working with some really good material here. Okay, first, we have not talked about it a ton. It has been hinted at that you are a total badass in track as well, just as a runner. You were all everything in soccer, of course, that goes without saying, but you were also almost literally all everything in track. Miss Minnesota in both. How many people in the state have ever been Miss Minnesota in both? I'm assuming it's a short list. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You were particularly good as a sprinter. I think I remember seeing like the 200, other stuff like that, which is super impressive. I would like to ask you where you think that top speed came from, because I think you've been on the record about this in the past, and I'd like to make sure we get it out there.
Well, it's funny because both of my parents joke that I was switched at birth.
Sure.
Because they're a little unsure about where the speed came from, but both of my parents were really athletic. I mean, played sports in high school. So there's definitely athleticism from both of them, but I think they do both joke about where the speed came from.
But I think you're being too nice, because there's so many viewers, millions of viewers. I think you're being too nice. I believe previously on the record, we've essentially admitted it did not come from your dad.
Really?
I thought this is sourced material. I believe you've admitted in the past that you're not quite sure it necessarily came from. Is it Matt also?
Yes, that's my dad.
Turns out there's a few Matts out in the world, because there's quite a few like boring Lutheran Minnesotans who all name their sons after like books of the Bible. So my parents, his parents, a lot of Matts and Matthews out there. Matthew, Mark in our twin cases. Again, boring Lutherans, shout out to them. But I think you have admitted that the dad is not the source.
That could be possible. I do recall beating him in a race when I was 9, so that could have been where the source came from.
That is a great example. And by the way, I've personally gotten shit from dads in pregame parking lots because we rep moms super hard. What do the moms think? We elevate moms nonstop. So dads do give us a lot of shit, but you know what? It's just necessary. We will always ride harder for moms than for dads.
Yeah, well, I guarantee I just got a text from my dad about maybe putting that story in the show. So,
well, you know what? Don't worry. When I'm down in the Dominican again, covering Maddie down there will be so much time that we will also unveil the very, very first "What do the dads think?" Matt will get out there. We will have plenty of showtime. Again, sorry, dads. Moms will continue to be tier 1 because I'm going to let you guys know they're also the strongest Patreon subscribers for us. So like, I'm not going to throw our biggest supporters down the drain. And of course, Maddie, you are a very high achieving person. You were being a little too humble about your academics earlier, but in general, you're very high achieving. You seem very put together. I'm assuming a lot of the stuff in your life is planned and scheduled, being in multiple sports. But can we talk about maybe a highway car swap incident that was required in order to make it to the state track meet on time? Are we talking about city highway, like 40 miles an hour? Are we talking like interstate 80 miles an hour? What level of Frogger are we talking about?
So me and my dad were on our way to the state track meet. I believe it was prelims, so I needed to race in order to qualify for finals.
And where was the meet? Where was the meet?
St. Michael, Albertville. So that's a little bit of ways away from Edina.
Sure.
But I remember being on interstate, and all of a sudden we were standstill. And at this point, 20 minutes had gone by, and I was like, what is going on? Because I'm already obviously nervous for my races. And I'm start freaking out to my dad. And so he gets out of the car because it's literally not moving. And I think it was a truck had like twisted and like turned over like in the middle. And so there had happened to be construction going on. So there was cement, like cinder, like, I don't even know.
Jersey barriers is it's very important for this story that the technical term is used. Everyone obviously cares that I know what those are called. By engineers in the field, they're called Jersey barriers.
Jersey barriers. So Jersey barriers were blocking me from, obviously, like, we couldn't peel off of the highway, or like we were seriously in the middle of the road.
Stuck.
And so I'm freaking out.
Yes.
My mom is driving up with one of her friends, and so they're a little ways behind, and I'm like, you have to come pick me up on the side of the road because I need to get to this meet.
Yes.
And so I'm trying to direct like my mom, because like Maps was taking her a different route because of the accident.
Yes.
And I'm trying to direct her. There's lots of screaming going on, and I have to end up jumping the Jersey barrier. Is that the correct name?
Yes.
And I hop over, and like there's full on traffic going. So my mom has to pull over in her car, and I hop in her car, and we end up getting to the meet like all good on time. And then I end up finding out that the meet's delayed like 3 hours because there were a bunch of buses in the same
thing
I was. So there was no reason for me to jump that barrier, but it was definitely a story.
I like the commitment. I like the commitment from all involved. I like that you admitted there was plenty of screaming going on, which makes me believe the story. I think that's good. That's really good. Yeah. And last of my my Edina related high school related questions. You are obviously the type of natural athlete who just goes ahead and tries long jump and like sets a record, like first time you do it or whatever happened, which is a real story and not just Matt hyperbole. I don't know if it was school record or state record. You can clarify that.
School.
Oh, only a school record for long jump. But have you considered whether you do track at UNC? Because word is, again, sources say, that you have been offered at the Tar Heels to also pick up a spring sport. Would you consider that maybe, for instance, in a non-U20 qualifying year to just double up and get wild and do a second sport?
Definitely have highly considered it. I know my parents probably wouldn't like me saying that because it's definitely, obviously, I mean, being a one sport athlete at any college program is hard in itself, but I think there's a piece of me this spring that's missing track that I didn't think I would miss.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see what the future.
Well, because you said, is lacrosse a straight up spring sport too? When you said you had a teammate who did lacrosse, right?
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, is the choice you're making as simple as you would miss all of spring soccer, or is it not that simple? Is it?
So you would 100% be with your spring sport team.
Okay.
Which is a sacrifice in itself, because that's where a lot of the development happens for soccer.
Right.
So I don't know if I'd be willing. Honestly, I don't think it's my lack of not wanting to run track. I think I want to pursue soccer and be the best soccer player I can be.
Right. Well, it's this tightrope to walk of like, if you felt comfortable enough that you really are pretty close to sort of maximizing your role in the soccer team, and like, you know, next fall you feel like you insanely settle in or whatever, blah blah blah, and there's still a sacrifice to it. It's not that you're not sacrificing, but it's like, okay, if freshman to sophomore year I felt like I really needed the full development jump, and then if I'm sort of, because I do think the thing people aren't really willing to ever say is there is some limit to what you can get out of spring and summer league play. Like it's because at a certain point, if you're not playing competitive games like with your full squad, it's not quite, it's still needed when you're trying to like build chemistry or like build in new players or like build individual, but it's not the same level of sort of chemistry building and, you know, skill building as the full regular season too. So it's like, there could be a point where you're so comfortable that you give it a run just to be like, well, we'll see what happens.
I have thought about it from like maybe a senior year thing.
Yeah.
Like just doing it senior year, but I don't know. There's just so many different factors that play into it. And obviously, like I asked Anson about it as well, and he was pretty adamant about me focusing on soccer this year, which is funny because before I got to school, he was so, yes, do both. He's very
oh, really?
supportive of dual sport.
Wow.
He believes in it a ton, actually, which is like why Julia Dorsey's able to do what she does.
That is actually like really cool. That is like, that's nuts to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. It's sort of it's truly insane that like coming into the fall, he would be the one telling you to be a dual sport, and you're like, I'm not sure. That is so opposite. Like, all due respect to D1 coaches, I love D1 head coaches. The ones we cover are legitimately really cool people, and like, but D1 women's head soccer coaches, when they want to be or if they want to be, can truly operate as if they are dictators. Like, D1 women's head soccer coaches can control your entire life. Like, they can be like, just in general, I'm not speaking about anyone individually, like, you have an absurd level of power. Like, if people think PJ Fleck controls like U of M athletics and like the football team and blah blah blah, D1 women's soccer coaches, I would argue, even though the revenue is not the same and like the shine isn't the same, I think they have maybe even more like power and influence within their world. Like, people have no idea the level of power they can have over players. So Anson telling you like, go do another sport, get nuts. Like, that is so rad.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely made me think about it a little bit more, just because he was so supportive of it. But I think like obviously me like sharing my hopes and aspirations for like, what I want for the future, I think he was definitely like, okay, then we really need to focus on like these things.
Totally. And it's also me as your unofficial free agent, unofficial free agent. I think you wouldn't do it senior year because honestly, you're going to get drafted in the winter and you won't be there for the spring semester. So
back on wood, let's hope.
Just as a free note, you're going to do it. Don't save it for senior because then it'll never happen. And then all you'll be able to do is like Olympic trials, and like, who wants that's just boring. Like, all right. Well, we have gone way too long because you are way too interesting, Maddie. First time on Equal Time, Maddie Dahlien, as we said at the very beginning, just recently named to the U20 U.S. national team. They're going to be playing down in the Dominican Republic May 24th, I believe, through June 3rd is the final of the CONCACAF Championship. That will qualify teams for the U20 World Cup next year. Maddie actually leaves well before that. She's going to be rocking it down in the Dominican. By the time we see her, she's going to be tanned out. She's going to be tanned out. Maddie, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.